Imagine a bridge that, by every rule of physics, should have fallen long ago. But it didn't. It's still here, centuries later. Almost like it's alive. This is the bridges that shouldn't exist. Who built the impossible stone arches? Stone arches built in a time with no concrete, no steel, no computers. Officially, they were made by simple medieval builders. But there's one big problem. There are no real blueprints, no clear names of the builders, no detailed records of how they did it. Only legends about the devil and bridges that appeared in one night. We look closer. We find the same perfect arches in other countries, in mountains, over deep gorges, in places that are dangerous to build even today. The shape repeats, the proportions repeat. As if one unknown mind once laid down a hidden network of stone bridges across the planet, and then disappeared. How will you look at an old stone bridge after simple math tells you the people of that time could not have built this? Because if they didn't build these impossible stone arches, then who created the bridges we still walk on today? We are told that history is a solved puzzle, that every stone has its neat little story, that the past sits safely in textbooks, labeled and dated, case closed. But what if I told you there is a bridge, at first just one single bridge, that breaks almost every rule we have been taught? Don't rush to laugh it off. We travel to a remote valley in the Pyrenees. Cold morning mist hangs over the river. A stone arch rises out of the fog above dark water. Tourists stop, take a few photos, check the view, and move on. No one asks the only question that really matters. This bridge has no steel, no concrete. In some sections you can hardly see any mortar at all. Just rough stones, cut and placed into a perfect curve, locking together and holding massive weight for more than 700 years. Maybe longer. Nobody can say for sure. I meet a local engineer, a quiet man with almost 40 years of experience. He stands at the base of the arch, arms crossed, staring up in silence. "I can't explain it," he finally says. "With what they had back then, it should not work this well." So let's pause for a moment. Let's look at the numbers instead of the legends. The span is roughly 30 meters. Some individual stones weigh over 2 tons. The structure has carried loaded carts, animals, people, and centuries of floods pressing against its foundations. And we are asked to believe this was designed and built by people from an age we casually call the Dark Ages. People with wooden tools, rope, and animal power. No blueprints have survived. No master engineer is clearly named. No detailed record of the construction process appears in any local or national archive. There is only the bridge itself, silent, precise, still standing. Here is the first crack in the official story. If you cannot name the builder, if you cannot show the plans, if you cannot explain the method in detail, then how can you be so sure when and by whom it was built? That is the first logical question. And once you dare to ask it here, in front of this one stone arch, you cannot unsee it. You cannot stop. Because this bridge is not unique. There are others, dozens of them, scattered across Europe, all sharing the same strange pattern. Flawless engineering on the ground, and gaping holes in their written history. So, the question is no longer whether something is wrong. The real question becomes, how deep does this crack in our history go? The deeper we dig into this story, the more the cracks widen. So I decide to do what any honest investigator should do. Find the people who built this bridge. Find their names, their tools, their records. I walk into the local archives, small rooms that smell of dust, old paper, and forgotten lives. Here, people have recorded births, deaths, marriages, land disputes, grain taxes. I expect drawings, work logs, payment lists, something solid. Instead, I find ghosts. The first document mentions a reconstruction after a fire in 1632. But reconstruction of what? There is no clear record of the original construction date, no before to match this after. The second archive calls it simply an ancient bridge, origin unknown. The third goes even further. It drops all pretense and just calls it Devil's Bridge and moves on. Let me underline that. Devil's Bridge, not Giovanni's Bridge, not the King's Bridge, not Master Builder Rodriguez's bridge. The devil. We are expected to believe that medieval communities, people who carefully documented who owned which field, who paid which tax, who owed whom a sack of grain, somehow forgot to write down who built their most important crossing. Isn't that just a little too convenient? I move from papers to pictures. I find early photographs from the 1860s and 1870s. In these images, the bridge is already old. The stones are already worn. In some shots, it looks half buried, as if the ground level around it has risen, as if time itself tried to swallow it. And here, the pattern becomes impossible to ignore. This is not a one-off story. It repeats. I search for other stone arch bridges across Europe. Same general era, similar design. Devil's Bridge in Switzerland, no builder named. Devil's Bridge in Bulgaria, no construction records. Pont du Diable in France. Legend says it appeared overnight, built by something not quite human. The official history tells us these bridges were raised by local craftsmen sometime between the 12th and 15th centuries. But who were these craftsmen? Where are their names? Where are the guilds that trained them? Where are the contracts, the apprenticeships, the lineages of master builders passing down this knowledge? Where are the quarries that supposedly supplied millions of tons of carefully shaped stone? On paper, almost none of this exists. What we do have are legends, nicknames, stories that blame the devil when the facts run out. And we have the bridges themselves, standing there like silent rebukes to every tidy paragraph in every history book that tries to explain them away. The mystery is no longer about a single strange bridge in a single valley. It is a network, a repeating pattern, a web stretching across countries, tied together by missing names and impossible arches, and leading to a question too big to ignore. What if the people we credit with these bridges never actually built them at all? What if they did not build these bridges at all? At first, this idea sounds insane, almost insulting. We want to believe in human genius. We want to respect the craftsmen of the past, not erase them. But there is one field where stories do not matter, and legends cannot help: mathematics. So, let's stop leaning on pretty tales and miracle legends. Let's put these bridges on trial using simple, ruthless arithmetic. I return to our first bridge in the Pyrenees. This time, I bring only two tools: a calculator and common sense. How many stones are we really talking about? I count the visible blocks, roughly 1,200 stones in the main arch alone. Average weight of each block, somewhere between 800 and 2,000 kilograms. Total weight of the arch, more than 1,500 tons of stone. And that is only the curve itself. Not the foundations, not the support walls, not the approach roads. Now comes the question that hits like a hammer. How many people actually lived in this valley around the year 1300? Historical data suggests roughly 200 to 300 people in the whole region. Let's be generous. Let's imagine that 100 men of working age drop everything and join the construction. Each stone has to be quarried, roughly shaped, moved across rough terrain, hauled up with wooden scaffolding, and set into place in a perfect curve with almost millimeter accuracy. If they manage to complete one stone per day, which is optimistic, that is 1,200 workdays just for the main arch. More than 3 years of flawless, uninterrupted labor. No harsh winters, no planting season. No harvest, no sickness, no wars or raids. Just perfect continuous work in a medieval mountain valley. But even that fantasy ignores a crucial piece. Where is the quarry? I search the valley. I comb through local geology reports and historical mining records. There is nothing that fits. The nearest known stone source that could realistically supply this type of granite, about 30 kilometers away, across 2 mountain passes. Now, imagine transporting a single 2-ton block over those mountains with horses and wooden carts. That is not a casual afternoon trip. That is weeks of effort for each stone. At minimum, the numbers do not care about our feelings. If the total population was around 300, if the nearest suitable quarry lay 30 kilometers away, if each major block took weeks to move, then this bridge should not have taken 3 years. It should have taken 30 years, maybe even 50, for one bridge in one remote valley. And yet we are calmly told that dozens of similar stone arches were built across Europe in roughly the same century, using the same kind of labor, tools, and logistics. Mathematics gives a blunt verdict. The official version does not just have a few cracks. It collapses under the weight of basic arithmetic. The timeline is warped. The comfortable alibi of official history crumbles like old mortar. So, if they did not build this bridge in the period we are told, then when was it really raised? And more importantly, by whom? If they did not build it in the time we are told, then when was it really raised? And by whom? The answer may be more shocking than any theory so far. Because this mystery is not limited to Europe. It is not trapped in one valley, one century, or one culture. So let's step beyond the Pyrenees. I find a stone arch bridge in the mountains of Peru. Same clean, perfect curve. Same keystone logic. The same almost impossible proportions between span, height, and thickness. Then another in Turkey, thrown across a deep gorge. Officially, it was built by Ottoman engineers in the 1500s. Then another in China, credited to the Ming Dynasty. I print the photographs. I overlay them. I compare rough measurements. I trace the arch lines on transparent sheets. They almost match, not just similar. Not just inspired by. Their mathematical ratios are nearly identical. How could such closely matching designs appear in cultures that, according to official history, never met? Never traded bridge-building techniques, never shared engineering manuals or guild secrets? We are told to relax and accept the phrase convergent evolution. The idea that humans, facing the same problem, naturally find the same solution. But here is what that idea cannot explain. The same hidden drainage channels carved inside the masonry, invisible to casual observers. The same strange symbols etched near the keystones. Geometric patterns that repeat in different countries, on different continents, under different empires. The same extra support stones placed in positions that make no sense to a modern engineer, unless you are using a method that official history insists did not exist at that time. This is not random convergence. This looks like a signature, a repeating design language written in stone across the entire planet, as if one unknown mind, or one forgotten civilization, once laid down a secret network of stone bridges stretching across continents, tying together trade routes we no longer remember, serving purposes we can barely guess. And then they vanished. Not slowly, not over many gentle centuries. Suddenly, leaving only their bridges behind, like bookmarks left in a library that later burned down. We see the same curve in the Andes and in the Balkans, in the Himalayas and in the Pyrenees, in places split by oceans, by languages, and by thousands of years of supposed isolation. So, a hard logical question rises to the surface. Who taught the whole world to build the same bridge? And why, in all our proud history books, do we have no memory of their name? And why do we not remember their name? Maybe because remembering would force us to look straight at something even more uncomfortable. The raw physical impossibility of what we are staring at. So, let's drag this story back down to earth, back to mud, sweat, and sore muscles. Forget the romance of stone arches for a moment. Let's talk about logistics. One block, roughly 2 tons. That is the weight of 2 family cars stacked on top of each other. Now, picture moving it. You have wooden carts, hemp rope, a few horses or oxen human backs. You do not have steel cables, engines, or trucks, hydraulic cranes, asphalt roads. The quarry sits about 30 kilometers away, over mountain terrain. The path is steep, narrow, and turns into slippery mud every time it rains. How many men does it take to move just 1 block? 20? 30? More, if the path is bad? How many trips can you realistically make in a month? 2, maybe 3, if the weather is kind and nothing breaks. Now, multiply that by roughly 1,200 stones, just for one bridge. The official story insists that small medieval villages, with total populations of 200 or 300 people, somehow organized this kind of operation, while also planting crops, raising children, building houses, paying taxes, and simply surviving the winter. So, where are the traces of that giant effort? Where are the records of huge work camps set up near the quarries and construction sites? Where are the supply lines that brought food, tools, and animals for hundreds of workers over many years? Where are the detailed technical drawings of scaffolding towers, pulley systems, and wooden formwork for the arches? We do not see them. What we do see are early photographs that create more problems than they solve. Bridges standing alone in almost empty landscapes. No clear roads leading in. No dense villages clustered around them. Some bridges appear half buried, as if a flood, a mudslide, or some other massive event raised the ground level long after the stone was set. In 19th century images, many of these arches already look ancient, not a few centuries old, but like they have been there for close to 1,000 years or more. Here is the disturbing thought that most historians will never say out loud. Maybe those people did not truly build these bridges. Maybe they inherited them. Maybe the so-called medieval period was not an age of great construction, but an age of repair, patching, paving, and reusing structures from a previous world. A world that quietly vanished from our timeline because admitting it existed would mean rewriting almost everything we think we know. All of this could be brushed aside as bad archiving, lost scrolls, and the natural chaos of history. If not for one stubborn fact, the bridges are still there, intact, silent, and, by all the rules we have been given, impossible. Perfect, silent, impossible, and everywhere. I go back to the old photographs, the real ones, from before restorations, before safety rails, tourists, and souvenir stands, from before we decided what these bridges are supposed to be. In these images, something feels wrong. One photo shows a stone arch standing in the middle of an empty field. No clear road approaches it. No visible path leads away. Just the bridge rising out of the ground, connecting nothing to nothing. Another photograph. A bridge half swallowed by earth. The arch above ground is still perfect, but the lower part is buried, as if the land crept up around it long after it was built. Another image. A bridge in a landscape so barren, so empty of houses, farms, or towns, that you cannot help but ask, why would anyone build here, unless they did not build here? Unless here looked completely different when these bridges were first raised. Slowly, a theory hardens in my mind, beautiful and terrifying at the same time. What if there was a pre-industrial, high-skill stone civilization? Not primitive, not medieval, something older, something we buried under false dates and patched up timelines. A civilization with engineering knowledge we have never fully recovered, with a network of roads, bridges, and aqueducts stretching across continents. With techniques so advanced that even our concrete highways crack and crumble while their stone arches still stand. And then, suddenly, they were gone. Not a slow fading away, not a gentle decline into myth, but a shock, a catastrophe, a flood, a plague, a climate crash. Something big enough to reset the world so completely that the survivors could not even remember how to maintain what their ancestors had built. The later cultures, the ones we label medieval, did not construct these bridges. They found them. They patched them when they could. They paved new roads over old foundations. They gave them new names. And when they could not explain them, they turned confusion into legend. The devil built it in one night. Maybe that was never real mythology. Maybe it was a kind of confession. We do not know how this was made. For a moment, everything clicks into place. Every anomaly, every missing record, every bridge that seems too old for its own story. They are not mistakes in our history. They are survivors from a history we erased. But then comes the pushback. Historians shrug it off. Engineers bring out standard explanations that sound neat on paper, but fall apart under the weight of the details. Evidence slips away into museum basements. Boxes are lost in wars. Restorations just happen to remove the most troubling carvings, the odd details, the symbols that do not fit the official story. Early photographs are mislabeled, misfiled, or simply gone. I sit with the weight of all this. What if we are spinning theories because we cannot face the simplest and most frightening possibility? That we do not know, that we have never really known, that every day we cross rivers and valleys on the bones of a world whose name we have completely forgotten. That we are walking on the bones of a world whose name we have forgotten. This is the abyss, the point where the investigation stops being about stone bridges and turns into something much darker, our timeline itself. What if history is not a smooth, unbroken story, but a shattered chain with missing links we have covered over using neat dates and convenient lies? Let's look at the breaks we do admit. The Black Death wiped out roughly 1/3 of Europe. Entire villages disappeared from the map. Libraries burned. Whole lines of knowledge vanished with the people who carried it in their heads. The collapse of the Bronze Age destroyed several empires in less than 1 century. Writing systems were abandoned. Trade networks went silent. Cities turned into piles of ash and broken walls. And those are just the catastrophes we are willing to talk about. How many others have we lost? How many times has the world reset, knowledge erased, roads left to crumble, bridges abandoned, while a handful of survivors tried to rebuild from fragments they barely understood? Think of it this way. A library burns, but the stone shell of the building survives. Centuries later, people find the structure. They do not know its true age. They move in. They store their own books on its shelves. They repair the roof. Over time, they start to say, "We built this." But they did not. They inherited it from ghosts. The stone bridges are not proof of medieval genius. They are bookmarks in a burned timeline, markers of whole chapters we can no longer read. We are not the first civilization to rise. We are almost certainly not the last. And that realization, that our place in history is neither unique nor guaranteed, should make us a lot more humble. We walk on roads we did not pave. We cross bridges we could not build from scratch. We live in the shadow of achievements we have quietly assigned to the wrong people in the wrong century for the wrong reasons. Why? Because admitting otherwise is too expensive. It would mean rewriting textbooks, questioning degrees, accepting that many of our experts simply do not have real answers. It would mean facing the possibility that some of our maps are closer to fiction than fact, that our confidence in knowing the past rests on ground just as unstable as the riverbanks beneath these arches, except the bridges, at least, are honest about their mystery. So, what does it mean to live in a world built on ruins we do not understand? What happens to our identity when we realize that much of what we thought was ours may have belonged to someone else first? These are not comfortable questions, but comfort is not the same thing as truth. And the bridges do not care about our comfort. They just stand there, waiting, watching, asking us without a single word, "When will you stop lying? When will you stop lying?" That question has followed me from the moment this investigation began. But standing here now, at the same bridge where all of this started, I realize something else. Maybe I have been asking the wrong thing the whole time. The sun is setting. The stone glows a deep amber in the fading light. The river slides under the arch, calm and patient, like it has all the time in the world. I reach out and touch the stone. It is still warm from the day, and I finally understand. Maybe the real question is not who built them. Maybe the real question is, what do they want from us now? These bridges have survived plagues, wars, floods, and centuries of human mistakes. They have outlasted empires. They have watched languages die and new ones appear. They are not fragile. We are. So what do these impossible stone arches ask of us? First, humility. We walk every day on things we cannot truly explain. That simple fact should make us softer, not harder, more careful, not more arrogant. Every time we cross an old bridge, we should remember, we stand on the work of people whose names we have lost, whose techniques slipped out of our hands, whose whole world we scraped out of the record and replaced with our own story. That is not a reason for shame. It is a reason for respect. Second, curiosity. Ordinary people are allowed to ask big questions. We do not need permission from experts who built entire careers on defending one version of events. You felt it too, did you not? That first small crack in your certainty when the numbers stopped making sense. That quiet voice at the back of your mind asking, what if they are wrong? Listen to that voice. The world is stranger, older, and more alive than the textbooks admit. And that is good news, not bad. Third, responsibility. If these bridges are messages from another time, if they are survivors from a world we forgot how to remember, then our task becomes simple and heavy at the same time. Protect them, study them, listen to them. Not treat them as cute tourist backgrounds, not use them as props for our shallow modern stories. See them as witnesses to a truth we are only just brave enough to look at. Next time you cross an old stone bridge, stop for 1 minute. Put your hand on the stone, feel its weight, its cold surface, its age pressing back against your skin. Ask yourself, whose footsteps are you really following? What knowledge had to die so that this one structure could live on? What voices are sealed inside this stone, waiting for someone curious enough and honest enough to hear them? You do not need to have all the answers, neither do I, but we owe it to these bridges, and to ourselves to keep asking the questions. Because the bridges that should not exist, they do exist, and they are still here, waiting to see what we do next.